The Diocese of Rome is reconciling itself with an institution founded by the most notorious serial abuser of the Francis pontificate. But where's the repentance? Folks are asking. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, can you catch our viewers up just very briefly on who the serial abuser is and what just happened?
Brad, we are talking about Father Marko Rupnik, the ex-Jesuit who has been accused of sexually abusing about 25 nuns, one or two lay women in that number, who was also excommunicated and rehabilitated. He was excommunicated for sacramentally absolving a sexual partner. Now, the director of the Aletti Center, which Rupnik co-founded, her name is Maria Campatelli. She met Pope Francis on Friday. The Vatican released a picture of the two meeting, but did not give us any information of what happened at that meeting.
So you mentioned reconciliation with the Aletti Center. How has that come about through Pope Francis?
The meeting that took place on Friday basically was an attempt, we are told, to preempt the Diocese of Rome's own clarification, which was issued yesterday. And this was a kind of public relations stunt where Pope Francis would meet Maria Campatelli, and that's the talk of the ground, and so would smooth out, the bombs that are being thrown now that the Diocese of Rome has published what people are saying is very clearly a whitewash of the entire Rupnik affair.
Now, the Aletti Center itself comes under the Diocese of Rome, so how has the Vicar General of the Rome Diocese responded to all this?
Now, remember, technically and de facto, Pope Francis is the Bishop of Rome in every sense of the word. He delegates that responsibility to his vicar, Cardinal Vicar, Angelo De Donatis. And Donatis has had very close relations with Father Rupnik. Now, remember, Pope Francis has also been a close friend and a brother Jesuit with Father Rupnik. And there's always been talk about Francis and Angelo Donatis favoring Rupnik, protecting him, etc., etc. Yesterday, the Diocese of Rome issued a statement saying that it had conducted a visitation and investigation beginning January this year into the Aletti Center. And I'm going to read you parts of the report. The canonical visit, it says, was carried out with the objective of ascertaining the methods of running the association, the effective functioning of its governing bodies, the examination of associative life in all its aspects, including the members' relationships with the founder and with the group of managers, etc., etc. Now, this is all managerial jargon. It then goes on to say that from this report, it clearly emerges that within the Aletti Center, there is a healthy community life without any particular critical issues. Note, it does not talk about the victims of Father Rupnik. Many of these victims were members of the Aletti Center. He met some of them allegedly at the Aletti Center, and the Aletti Center was closely associated with the Loyola community, Slovenian Loyola community, and the victims, again, were sisters from this community. It goes on to say the visitor was able to ascertain that the members of the Aletti Center, although saddened by the accusations received and the ways in which they were handled, chose to maintain silence, despite the vehemence of the media, to guard their hearts and not claim any irreproachability to set oneself up as the judges of others.
Jules, the director herself, who met with Pope Francis, she's been vehement about defending Rupnik to the hilt. Could you catch our viewers up on that?
Absolutely. We did a story on this, Brad. In fact, we have done over 22 stories on the Rupnik saga. Maria Campatelli and her associates came out earlier this year with a very strong statement saying that they had been defamed by the media. The Rupnik stories were all false. Rupnik himself had applied to leave the Jesuits. He's now been dismissed from the Jesuits. Very strong defense from this woman. Interestingly, she talks about the media, defaming Rupnik, but we've written a number of times to her, to the Aletti Center. I've even sent feelers to certain priests, Jesuits, who left the order and now are associated with the Aletti Center full-time. They were members of the Aletti Center, asking them, pleading with them, if you have another side to the story, please tell us, so we can present both sides of the story. And if what you're saying is true, we can defend you. But there was never any response from them, and they did not respond to any of the media reports. Now, remember, the media, and including us, we gave 4 or 5 testimonies, first-person testimonies from some of these nuns. Some of them are pretty graphic, including nuns saying how Rupnik forced them to have a threesome in bed with him.
Now, Jules, moving to the Jesuits for a moment. Now, the Jesuits, he's no longer, Rupnik was kicked out of the Jesuits, but not for all the money that passed through his hands with all the lucrative business deals with the Aletti Center and elsewhere, and it wasn't for all the sex abuse, alleged sex abuse. It was really disobedience. Can you catch us up on that very briefly? And then how are the Jesuits now responding to this?
Absolutely. He broke his vow of chastity. Nothing happened. He broke his vow of poverty because he was, had a company, I think, established in 2009. He owned 90% of the company. Another sister owns 10%. And the company draws in, millions every year. And he's not allowed to do that, not even allowed to have a bank account. And yet nothing was done. But the moment he broke the restrictions imposed on him and stepped out of the borders of Lazio, that's around Rome, he was, thrown out of the order. At the moment, the Jesuits are completely silent because he is no longer a Jesuit. But the talk on the ground is, of course, that makes him totally unaccountable. He's very much a priest. He's not under any sanctions. He can celebrate Mass, etc., etc. He's not a bishop under a bishop, so he can't do that technically, publicly. But he and the Aletti Center are free to carry on as if nothing ever happened.
So I guess that just leads us right into the final question here, Jules. What happens then to Rupnik now? And what happens to his major art projects around the world?
2 things. First of all, the last sentence of the press statement issued by the Diocese of Rome is pretty dodgy. This is what they say. The visitor dutifully also examined the main accusations that were made against Father Rupnik, especially the one that led to the request for excommunication. Based on the copious documentary material studied, the visitor was able to find and therefore reported seriously anomalous procedures whose examination also generated well-founded doubts about the request for excommunication itself. So this is a pretty badly convoluted sentence. It's very difficult to exegete it. But from what it seems to say, it's trying to give Rupnik a wriggle room, a loophole to get out of the whole excommunication that was imposed on him, and, of course, the rehabilitation that took place. The big question, as you rightly asked, is what happens to Rupnik now? And this is a major question because there are millions of dollars, pounds, and euros involved. Remember, the Aletti Center is an extremely big and critical money maker, but also a provider of mosaics, to major cathedrals, churches, seminaries in Europe. And much of the work has been stopped as a result of these stories. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, the Diocese of Geneva said that they were going to re-examine or to examine whether they should dismantle all of Rupnik's mosaics. The Cathedral of Aparecida has also stopped this major project. And this green lighting from the Diocese of Rome, from Cardinal Angelo De Donatis, and the meeting of Maria Campatelli with Pope Francis is meant to tell the world all is okay. You can continue to employ the services of the Aletti Center, and guess who will continue to be the brain behind this center? None other than the iconic celebrity artist, Father Marko Ivan Rupnik.
And just one final question, Jules. Rupnik now, as far as you know, is free to find another bishop, free to be fully employed by that bishop, and even dispense sacraments under that bishop?
Absolutely. There were rumors that he comes from Slovenia, and there were rumors he is approaching one or two of his bishop friends in Slovenia. But, a couple of bishops actually issued statements saying that this was not the case. They would not grant him an episcopal umbrella. But that doesn't mean he can't find a bishop, in the Cameroon or Nigeria or some place like that. Yes, he is free, and he continues to be a priest in quote-unquote good standing.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Rupnik, we know, was excommunicated for absolving a sexual accomplice. That excommunication was later lifted, but we know thereby that Rupnik was involved in a sexual relation or relationships. Even apart from the score, 25 plus others, mostly nuns, who have accused him of doing this very thing over the course of 30 years. So the big question is, why hasn't he been laicized and permanently removed from any possibility of priestly ministry moving forward? So much for zero tolerance. Jules, thank you so much for staying on top of this multifaceted story.
Thank you, Brad.